joining us in the studio, and we do this on a monthly basis. I just judging by the telephone calls, I sometimes think that there are people out there who would recommend that we do it on a more frequent basis. Probably Kelton has a lot of other things he has to do with his life. Kelton Hatch joining us from Idaho Fish and Game this morning, but I would dare say that you're the most popular guest we have on the air, just judging by the telephone calls we normally get.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome.
In fact, a lot of it is you're talking about things that interest real people.
Well, it's things that, I mean, people move to Idaho or they live here in Idaho and they enjoy, I mean, they're here because of what Idaho has to offer.
Yeah.
Great hunting, fishing, and outdoors, and so, I'm glad people listen and I hope they call in.
I have an old boss of mine, and he has lived over the years in St. Louis, Chicago. Now he's in Milwaukee working for some really big company. And I was talking with him the other day, and he'd prefer to be somewhere like Idaho versus the headaches and everything else he's got to deal with where he lives now.
Yeah, I just don't understand why people dislike themselves so much that they live in cities. I've just never understood that. I says, you just must hate yourself. I mean, if you're going to live in it. But I'm glad people like that so that we can kind of keep, parts of Idaho a little bit rural still. And so, I mean, Idaho's growing, this sounds really bad, but Idaho's growing way too fast for myself.
It's growing fast. I drove by Mountain Home a couple of weeks ago. And there are 3 exits now for Mountain Home, and all of that is because of that huge development that's grown up on the edge of town.
Yeah, and I mean, you see the Ada County and all that area just growing, and Twin Falls is starting to grow. And I mean, since I was a kid, I mean, I think we've gone from 800,000 to 1.7 million in Idaho, and that's just quite a few folks.
Yeah.
But it's a beautiful place, and there's a lot of neat things to get out and do.
Want to point out it's 8 minutes after 9 o'clock, 69 right now. Kelton Hatch joining us in studio. Bill Colley with you too on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. And this is Top Story. You got a lot to talk about today. First note you have here is pick up tags before August 1st.
I just wanted to remind folks, if you drew a controlled hunt tag, this is one of those things, Bill, that everybody's upset at because a lot of people didn't draw permits this year. The reason being is we've actually had a major increase, or about a 10% increase, in people applying for these controlled hunts this year. And so, I mean, hunts like the South Hills down here in 54, it went up to about a 1 in 7, 1 in 6.5, 1 in 7 drawing odd this year. And the youth tag for that same area went from like a 1.4 to a 1 in 6 drawing odd. So drawing odds are getting tougher, but if you did draw one of those tags, you need to pick it up by August 1st, because if you don't, then it goes back up in the lottery again for somebody else to draw for the second chance. And so if you want to hunt the hunt that you drew, get those tags picked up now.
And you've got to mention here, too, that some elk tags have sold out. That's, again, population growth and interest in this.
It is. It was crazy. We started elk tag sales this year at midnight on the internet. By the time we got into the office at 8 a.m. to get the computers fired up and stuff, I mean, I was there earlier, but by the time we got the computers fired up and the office staff downstairs to start selling, they'd already sold out Diamond Creek Zone tags, which is over in eastern Idaho, right along the Idaho-Wyoming border. There's 1,700 tags that had sold that night from midnight until 8. And then the Sawtooth A tag, which is an archery hunt just up by Stanley Basin and up in that country. And there's like 700 permits up there, and those had all sold out. And by noon, all the rifle Sawtooth B tags had sold out, and they're going fast. Apologize for those that didn't get it, because we got a lot of calls. I had a buddy called me yesterday, says, "What's going on? I usually buy my tag a couple days." And I says, "Well, you're a day late and $1 short as usual, because they sold out 24 hours ago, and you're apparently calling me today." And so it's just one of those things we have to really be vigilant to get those permits. I mean, you look at them selling out that fast, they may end up going to a controlled situation just to draw to give people, so we don't blow up the systems by everybody trying to get on at midnight and get their tags purchased.
Are you required to have the hunter safety course in order to actually become a hunter?
If you was born after 1970, I think it's 3. You have to have the hunter education class. And, it's like I say, you have to have. It's actually a really good course, and anything that we can do to teach our children or folks to be a little bit safer when they're in the woods, I think is a really good thing. But yeah, you need to go take those hunter education classes. We offer a lot of different ways to do it. Have you ever taken it yourself, Bill?
In
Years
New
ago.
York, yeah, 30 some years
30
ago.
some years ago. You see, I never did take the class because I was grandfathered in because I was born prior to 73. But it's hard to believe that a lot of 73-year-olds are old enough to have children now.
Yes.
I mean, I would say that kind of jokingly because I don't feel like I'm old enough to have kids yet. But so just about everybody that's in that age is taking these classes. You can either do it online, and then it's a field day on the weekend. You just have to sign up for a 4-hour field day, and we also offer a new class that lets you take hunter and bow hunter ed at the same time, or you can take the classroom class. We just put 4 classes on the computer as of yesterday. So if you're looking for a hunter ed class, you're thinking of going hunting, now is the time to get signed up for it. If you don't have time for the full blown class, just go online and take it online. And if you take the hunter ed online now, there isn't a field day associated with that. And so we're trying to streamline things because we're just getting such a demand for these classes.
For people, by the way, who really like to get more details on this, would you send them to the website?
I would, you betcha. Go to fishandgame.idaho.gov and then click on the Hunter Ed icon, and it'll give you the different options. You can throw your zip code in there, hit the button, and it'll fire back all the classes that are in that area, and you can sign up online and everything. So we're getting pretty high tech rednecks.
It's 9:13. Kelton Hatch, our guest from Idaho Fish and Game, and you're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX, as well as online, newsradio1310.com. That might be high tech too.
Yeah.
A lot of my friends, though, haven't figured out how to hit listen live yet. So
Yeah. Well,
still working on. They just graduated from typewriters, I believe,
yes,
and they moved on. Hey, there's something
I resemble that.
Yes. I still type just with an index finger. I'm fast, but it's just the one.
Yeah.
You've got something here that I read about the other day, and I know Benito was talking about it as well. There's moose wandering in the area. It's rare that they're actually a moose in this part of the state, right?
Yeah, this is just kind of a new phenomena that's been happening over the last probably 4 years. We've just got a growing moose population over here. They've migrated in. We started seeing moose. Oh, I moved here 13 years ago from eastern Idaho, and we were barely starting to see a few moose in the South Hills once in a while. Now we've got a hunting season down there. We're getting moose. We've had I think it's been 7 moose in town between here and Burley this spring so far. I just actually put a video on YouTube. It's under Idaho Fish Game, and then you type in moose, and it was a moose that was downtown on Overland. And we ended up getting him to the edge of town before we darted her. But what's happening is a lot of these. We had one hanging out by O'Leary. Was there for 3 or 4 days. We was trying to get a dart in her, but the problem is we had a dart in her a week before in downtown Kimberly because she had been in Kimberly. We'd hauled her down to Nevada, right down to the Nevada border in the bottom of Shoshone Basin. She almost beat us back to town. She says it's prettier there and the grass is greener. So but what happens is these cow moose, they'll have their calves and they'll kick their last year's calf off. And most of these moose that are coming into town are yearlings that have just been kicked off. They're feeling sorry for themselves. They head downhill. They're looking for a friend. They get on a river corridor like Rock Creek or something. They follow it down. They walk into a neighborhood because it's nice and green grass and they fall asleep. Well, the next morning when everybody wakes up, they're going, "Oh my heck, there's a lot of people here," because they move in typically in the cover of darkness. And so and we're just getting a higher population. So if you see one of these, try not to take pictures with your cell phone. I mean, control yourself. They're very dangerous. They can get very aggressive. More people are injured yearly by moose than bears. And so give us a call and we'll help we'll kind of survey the circumstances and figure out what the best option is.
They can be very shy, but if you get too close to them, they have a nasty reaction.
Well, they do. Cows with calves, and you say cows with calves, but I've seen yearlings, I've seen young bull. I mean, we were over a few weeks ago pushing a moose out of it was just trying to get it out of the edge of town, and the stinking young bull lowered his head and came after us. And the thing is they don't eat you, they stomp you, and I mean, they're big animals, and they stomp until you quit twitching. And so you don't want to get underneath them. And so give us a call, stay away from them. And, they're not, you can't hurt them like you can cattle. I mean, they're just difficult animals to deal with. And so that's why we usually dart them. We put an ear tag in them so that if hunters are up hunting, that hopefully they don't shoot one with an ear tag, because that could mean we have the date and the year on the tag so people know how long the carfentanil has been in their system, because we don't want you getting high from eating your moose. And so
I remember I've only seen them on a couple of occasions. I can remember when I lived in Vermont. I was driving home from work one night, and I lived out on a mountainside, and I saw a bull standing on a small bluff off the side of the road. But as soon as he saw that the car was coming down the road, he took off.
Yeah.
And then I was going to New Hampshire on Old Route 2, and I was driving along, and there was a cow. She was she was drinking out of a stream alongside the road. But as soon as the traffic came along, they're quick. She just darted back into the woods at that point.
Yeah. No, you see, and there's actually quite a few moose. I've seen as many as five, 6 in one day in the South Hills. Different moose. Seen 3 over in Sawmill, and then just one over the ridge, and picked a couple up over by Father Sons, and then went around over by Magic, and there's another one, and then went down to the Wagon Wheel Springs, and there's a couple more over there. And so, no, that we got quite a good population of them, and this is something that folks around here are just going to have to get used to.
And because it's dry here, this is why they move into town, is because shrubs and grass and the like.
Well, they get in those river corridors. I mean, people don't understand, but like Rock Creek and the Snake River Canyon are really migrational corridors for wildlife. We get tons of deer, not elk, but moose, mountain lions, other critters that use these riparian zones without housing in it to move across the landscape through here. And so we get, every year we have a few incidences of yearling kittens, mountain lion cubs getting kicked off. They're not cubs anymore because they're big, but they jump on somebody's goat or horse. And so a lot of wildlife use those corridors.
We've got more with Kelton Hatch coming up in just a few minutes. Of course, he'll be available this hour as well to take a telephone call or two from anybody who might be interested. Just keep in mind, he'll be here until, just before 10 o'clock this morning. It's 70. You're listening to Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com with Bill Colley as well. 20 minutes after 9 o'clock. Our studio guest this hour, Kelton Hatch. He is joining us from Idaho Fish and Game, and he does this with us on a monthly basis. He's also available if you have a question or comment, too. You can give us a shout. Telephone number 736-0300, 736-0300. And, of course, we're heading now toward what they call it high summer or middle of the summer here, and so people are going to have...
It's called closer to hunting season.
Yes. For a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's like one of those things when you were a kid, you were waiting for a big holiday to come along.
Kind of Christmas.
You have a note here, something called commission meeting. Fill us in on that.
What a commission meeting is we have a board of commissioners that help govern the Fish and Game Department, and everything that is changed, it's typically changed to the commission. And this next week, it's going to be on the 29th and 30th. The Fish and Game Commission will be meeting in Pocatello. If you want to go over and testify at the public hearing, if there's anything that's just driving you nuts, or you want to see change, run over there, and at 7 p.m. at the Pocatello Regional Office, you can get up and testify to the commission on the things you'd like to see changed. The things they're going to be talking about, I recommend if people have a real interest in hunting and fishing and want to get involved, go sit in on one of these commission meetings and learn how the system works. basically I'm just going to run through a list of a few of the things they're going to talk about is the release of the bighorn. I mean, this is pretty. They'll talk about releasing a bighorn sheep tag for auction and the lottery tag, which we've done for several years. That money comes back to the department to help manage the sheep program. They're going to talk about the direction of animal damage control board on how that should function, like landowners that have elk and deer get in there and destroy crops. They're going to be talking about that a little bit. Non-resident deer and elk quotas. They're going to talk about set aside for outfitters. Uh, Look at having a mandatory trappers education class. We've been doing a lot of research on this, and I just attended a 5-day trapping workshop. I've trapped most of my life, but it was one of the educational programs we're looking at putting on something similar to that. Sharp-tailed grouse season. They're looking at discounted non-resident second elk and deer tags. What that is residents, if you fill your deer tag or you want to go hunting in another area and you need a different tag, you can buy one of the leftover non-resident tags because we've set aside X amount of deer tags and for non-residents, and if they don't purchase them, they're open to the general public, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And so there's a bunch of things we're looking at doing, so run on over and participate in the meeting. If you have any questions, you can give us a call at the regional office, or I really recommend going to it, though. It's pretty cool meetings.
We have a caller with us, and I want to thank the caller for being patient. You're on the air on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com, and with our guest, Kelton Hatch.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm curious, seeing as how Fish and Game has come up with a 10-year-old hunt, for the younger folks in our society, I think that's a good thing. I think to a point, though, there's a lot of them that aren't capable of handling a firearm at that age. But I'm really curious about when are you guys going to do a hunt for the elderly? Us guys that are retired and can't get out and hike like we used to and have a hunt of our own instead of just the little kids. We're the ones that put in the money all these years.
Yeah, and you have. That's something that I think would be good for bringing up to the commission meeting. These youth tags, it has, I would agree, some of these kids probably aren't mature enough or big enough to handle firearms, and that's what we try to leave that up to the discretion of the parents. Let's people have a little bit of free agency, and hopefully they choose in the right for their situation. And we've had this brought up several times on the elderly opportunities and things like that. We have worked towards discounts on tags and licenses, but that's something that's never come to pass. But I'm sure the commission would be more than happy to entertain the comments, and I just recommend going over to Pocatello that commission meeting.
Well, we've talked to the guys at Jerome. Some friends of mine were all elderly and can't do that much anymore, and they've told us that they have done this kind of thing in the past, and I'm a lifelong resident. No, they haven't.
Yeah, and I work out of the Jerome office, and I don't know of anything that we've ever had that permits just special hunts for the elderly and things like that. We do one thing that we have done is if the youth tags are left over, those are given the second chance. They're not given to guys like my age or women like in my age, but if you're, I think it's 60 and older, you can apply for the leftover youth permits. And so, I guess it's not the whole enchilada, but it's at least moving in that direction a little bit. So,
want to thank him for the call. We've got more with Kelton Hatch on the way. I'm going to talk a little bit about fire danger. Big drought, especially in the northern part of the state, too, as well. Mm-hmm. 70 right now, 9:30. You're listening to Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Top Story with Bill Colley, and, of course, Kelton is our guest this hour. Joining us in studio, Kelton Hatch. He is joining us from Idaho Fish and Game. He's got quite a bit still to talk about, but also he's fielding a telephone call or two if you'd like. I do want to remind you, you can touch base with us at 736-0300. And I'm Bill Colley on Top Story as well. News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. 70 coming up on 9:34. Fire danger. I just was reading this morning that up in the northern part of the state, they have some real serious issues with drought. But it's dry everywhere, and the little thunderstorm you get through every now and then, like a couple of nights ago, that water hits, comes down fast, and it all just runs off. So it's not necessarily making things a lot more moist.
No, it's not. Fortunately, with as hot as it's been, it kind of was a good setup this year. We were dry early on. The cheatgrass didn't grow very tall, so there's not a lot of flash fields out there. I mean, there is enough to do some rip-roaring fires, don't get me wrong, but it's not like it has been on some years. Then we got a lot of precip, and things are still staying fairly green, especially in the South Hills. But every year I just try to throw this out there. I like to talk about fires and just people, so maybe somebody's just a little bit more cautious. Because, I mean, it was just last week we had a fire in the South Hills. That lightning storm went through, lit one up Friday night. Fortunately, a rainstorm came through, and the Forest Service had jumped on the fire. Had an air tanker pulling water out of, or a helicopter pulling water out of, what is it? Murtaugh Lake. Mine did blank.
Senior moments. I get those now that I'm
yeah.
past 50.
Yeah, me too. And so, but they were pulling water out there, and they jumped on it, and then the rainstorm came in. But it's just that time of year. People are up recreating a ton right now. Everybody's trying to get those weeks of camping in and stuff. Just be cautious with fireworks. Watch where you park. Clean your catalytic converters out and around your exhaust pipes underneath your cars. Make sure you have your baffles in your motorcycles and ATVs, so you're not your spark arresters, so you're not starting fires that way. And be really careful when I was up talking to a group of hunters, and it was a little bit later in the year. Well, yeah, a little bit later in the year than this, but I mean, they just had a fire in just a kind of a silly spot. A big breeze came along, pushed it into the grass, and I mean, in the time that we stopped and left there, they'd burned almost 5,000 acres.
Yeah.
And so they happen extremely fast, and you can't be too cautious with fire. I've had, my fair shares of instances with fires themselves. Fortunately, I haven't burnt the mountains down.
We used to burn off brush, in fact, when I was a kid growing up, and, we could try to control it, but I remember one time that fire actually caught a willow tree alongside a creek on fire, and
it was green.
We had a bucket brigade. We fought that thing for hours, and that's when you realize how quickly things can get out of control.
It can, and so just be cautious when you're up there, because we just don't want to lose any of that good wildlife habitat up there. And I hate to see man-made fires destroying that, and they're costly, and they're dangerous, and just a lot of issues with them. So be careful.
You got a fishing update for us too, as well.
I do. Fishing right now, if you're looking for something close to town, most of our kids' ponds and stuff like that are really struggling right now. In other parts of the state, we've had a lot of fish tipping over. It's gotten so warm. This Friday, I forget where's our fishing trailer going to be this week, Bill?
Of course, on the 22nd, be out in Hagerman.
It's out in Hagerman, so we'll be at Hagerman Oster 1. And so run down there and fish with our fishing trailer. That's our Take Me Fishing trailer. It allows you to fish without a license that day. If you're more of a seasoned angler and just want to go out and do some fishing, Salmon Falls Creek is still fishing pretty good. They're doing well on the walleye and bass and the trout. Water temperatures are staying pretty warm, and they're doing better for walleye at night through the evening hours. And then Magic has really slowed down. Water's got hot. Fish have gone deep where they can, and it's not as good. But probably the hot ticket right now is head up to Pine. Go up there and fish Anderson Ranch. They've been just killing the kokanee for the last, probably 4 weeks. I mean, last Thursday I was up there, and there's like 58 boats out there trolling for kokanee, and they're 16 inchers. I mean, they're big kokanee salmon, and kokanee can be as small depending on the population. Have you ever eaten kokanee?
No.
They're really a luscious dark red meat, really good eating. They got soft mouths. They're suggesting to use a double hook setup because they're big enough that they put up a pretty good fight. downriggers are running at about 40 feet, and you can actually catch them on the surface or just a few feet under early in the morning or late in the evening when they're out feeding. But that's probably the hot ticket item right there, or head up in the hills and hit some of these streams where it's still a little bit cool.
I can just, now that we've been talking about this, I'm getting that aroma when you're cooking fish out in a pan.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm excited. We're headed. I'm taking a group of Boy Scouts. Get to go up with a group of Boy Scouts this next week, and we're headed up into the Bighorn Crags. We'll be eating fish every day. It's going to be awesome. 9,000, 10,000 feet.
Healthy living.
Yep, it'll be fun.
More with Kelton Hatch on the way in just a couple of minutes. He's joining us from Idaho Fish and Game. 70, 940, Bill Colley with you as well on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Our studio guest, Kelton Hatch, joining us from Idaho Fish and Game. We've got a few more minutes left with him this morning, and then we'll have to figure out a date for August.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're not getting people. You can see we're right in that doldrums of the year. We're getting a few calls, but not a lot because once we get closer to hunting season, I think those will kick up.
Yeah, that itch people will start getting.
Yes, they get a little bit more. Well, you see, I was telling you earlier when I was off there, it's like hunting is like one of these obsessions. I've been working my dogs for the last 2 months. I do want to tell people, get out there if you're a bird hunter. Start exercising your dog now because, August is not that far away, and some of our bird seasons kick off then, and you want your four-legged friend to be in good shape and ready to go.
You've got a note here about reporting dead animals, and I don't know if it's really hit us much in the Magic Valley. You go northwest, though, and they've had a lot of issues with plague.
Northwest and southwest also over in that area. And so what I put that down, if you go out and you're out and about, you're running around in the woods and stuff, and you find a bunch of dens or burrows or just dead critters laying on top of the ground, that's what they're finding. We in these plague areas, please get a hold of us or get a hold of the disease center. Center for Disease Control, because we are trying to keep a monitor on this. This is one of those years we got more stinking voles and mice than you can shake a stick at, and it's because of that. This is just one of those deals that springs up when you get high populations, and so if you're out there, I don't like letting my dogs are notorious gopher and squirrel eaters. I really, really try to watch it right now because of the issues that we have going on with this plague. We haven't, like I said, you said, we haven't had it in the Magic Valley, but we are monitoring it. We just need your eyes and ears out there to help us.
Roadkill. Also, you've got a couple of notes about that.
Yeah, roadkill. Well, I got a call the other day. I appreciate people pulling dead animals off the road. If you hit a deer with your car or an elk or a moose or any of that, you can take it home and eat it. You just have to go into the fishandgame.idaho.gov website and go to roadkill, fill out a roadkill report. It prints you off a little license and you can keep it. That way we don't have these animals. But somebody had hit a deer and drug it into a guy's hayfield. Well, then he's going along and and you can see the drag marks. Well, he didn't find it for 2 days later. Well, now when he grabbed a hold of it, it was pretty broken down.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that pleasurable a deal. So I'm just saying, please drag them off the edge of the road. Just don't drag them into the farmer's field, because then they'll end up plugging up their swather or something like that with it. Just get it off the shoulder of the road. If it's still alive, give us a call at the office or call 911, and dispatch can get a hold of one of our officers or one of the ISP or county police departments or city police can go out and dispatch that animal so they don't have to suffer.
And you also, you're closing on this, lots of raptors. Lots
and lots and lots of. Well, why do you think we got lots of hawks this year? Lots of mice.
Yeah, you were just mentioning it.
Yeah, so we've got, I've had 6 phone calls this week of hawks and owls in town, in people's barns. Just after work, I'm getting these calls, And so if you have a hawk or an owl or something like that that's getting in trouble, call us at the office. Hopefully will take care of itself. But if you got it, if you can see that it's actually got a broken bone or something like that, give us a call. But if it's just hopping around on the ground, a lot of times these hawks are eating so much that they can't get off the ground. They'll get into a whole pile of voles somewhere, or they'll eat 1 or 2 or 3 too many, and then they can't fly for an hour or two. It leaves them pretty vulnerable to cats and dogs and other raptors. But there's not a lot we can do with them either because they're just a little full. And so, and we had a lot of double clutches this year of chicks. It seems like the barn owls started breeding really early this year. Lots of chicks in it. We just did a lot of food source out there, so there's a lot of birds.
I hit a deer once years ago, speaking of roadkill, and I was driving home late one night from a class, and I was along a ridge line, and this doe just jumped off the hill at the ridge line. There was no time to react.
Committing suicide.
Yeah, and my big old 71 Impala took it out,
Yeah.
one deer to another. So, and I didn't know, I was near a county line, I wasn't quite sure, and I lost a couple of headlights because she had 4 headlights on those old Impalas. So I drove down to the local police station and ran in, and I knew the guy who was working that night, and I told him, I said, take a look at my card. And I said, you got to take a look at the deer with me too. So he said, yeah, I'd like to see what we got out there. So we drove, and of course it turned out it was across the county line, and we drove out there. He got out with his flashlight. He looks and he says, hey, you split it right in half. Because apparently I hit it just at an angle on that corner by the headlights, and it spun her around. And just, she died instantly, which is probably a good thing.
It is a good thing. You hate seeing anything suffer.
The next day, though, I drove by and someone had already picked it up.
Oh yeah, if you hit them in the part of the body you hit them in typically isn't good to eat, but the rest of them is completely fine typically.
Yeah.
And so
don't break the bladder.
No, it's good protein, a good protein source, and so if you're interested in that. We don't want people baaing off the road to hit a deer. So if you're driving down the road and we see tracks through the field and the deer's dead in the field, we probably, that's not a good thing. But if it's something that happens at night or on the road, you are eligible to take those off and utilize the protein from them.
Kelton Hatch, thank you much.
Hey,
Mike
thank
Gallagher
you.
is coming up next on News Radio 1310 KLIX.